and welcome to In the Kitchen with Mary Mac. Today we're going to bring you a recipe for pasta primavera, originally known as spaghetti alla primavera. This is a classic American recipe from the 1970s. It doesn't sound like a classic American recipe from the 1970s. It sounds like some really old Italian recipe that people have been making for 200 years, but that is not the case. This recipe was created by an American restaurateur whose name was Sergio Macchioni, and he was an owner of a restaurant called Le Cirque, a French restaurant in New York City. This restaurant opened in like 1974, so sometime after that, he says he thinks it was in 75, he was on vacation with a group of friends in Nova Scotia, and he developed this recipe. This thing was insanely popular in New York City in the 70s, and probably I would say into the 80s. It also became insanely popular across the country at that time because Craig Claiborne of the New York Times wrote about it in his column and then posted a recipe for it, and then it ended up in a cookbook that he did and other cookbooks, and it just blew up, probably, I would say, due to the nature of the recipe, probably because it was something that home cooks could actually manage, even though the original recipe was like really, I won't say complicated, but it had a lot of steps, and it might seem daunting to look at it. This pasta, it was actually, like I said, it was called spaghetti alla primavera. I was kind of laughing in talking to some friends and then reading some posts from an Italian cooking site that I'm on. When I was young, and I would say like in the 60s and 70s, it was just spaghetti. Like, people didn't say pasta. You didn't hear that term in the United States that I can gather from the people that I've talked to. You were having spaghetti for supper. In the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, things were beef was very expensive and people were trying to save money, so spaghetti really became popular in the menus of American households because you could make spaghetti several different ways, and it was pretty cheap, and it went a long way. You know, you could cook a pound of spaghetti, put whatever on it, and it was good. People liked it, and it went a long way, fed a lot of people. So spaghetti recipes were hot. Well, this recipe, it was like an Alfredo. It was heavier than an Alfredo, but it was very similar to an Alfredo with sautéed vegetables in it, which I would say is probably why it became very popular. And I think it was really popular even into the 90s because I can remember getting it at stores that had like a local restaurant freezer section. One of the local places where we live used to always have pasta primavera in the freezer section. At some point, it disappeared, and I'm going to say pretty much fell from popularity as fast as it rose to popularity. Some people blame it on the richness of the sauce because the original recipe called for 3 cups of heavy cream in the sauce, which is a lot of cream. I mean, that is a lot of cream. So I think that may have been some of it. And you have to think, like, in the 90s, people were beginning to watch their calorie intake in general, their fat intake. Like, it became somewhat fashionable, to lighten all these recipes. So I'm pretty sure that people said, hey, this already has a bunch of spaghetti in it. Why are we going to, and they just cut it loose. They just let it go, which is odd to me because it can be such a good, it's a good recipe. It's a good meal. It's very tasty. You can put in what you have or make it however you want. You can easily make it your own. So I don't really understand that. But even Alfredos kind of fell out of favor for a while. Like, basically, you probably would say like fettuccine Alfredo. That's generally something that was on a lot of menus. That kind of has made a comeback too. Probably because they're seasoning it different, which I often find to be very funny. But one of the things that I just love to see on a menu is a Cajun fettuccine Alfredo, because I don't know who came up with that combo. It's good, but it doesn't seem like it should go together. So, you have like chicken Alfredos and stuff like that. There's a lot that you can do with an Alfredo sauce, but even an Alfredo sauce Some people do use cream in those, but they're not intended to have cream in them. So this whole thing is probably, I would say probably somebody said, hey, I can make an Alfredo sauce or whatever, and we'll do this to it. And that may be how it came together, because there are as many stories about the origins of this recipe as there are ingredients that you can put in this recipe. They're all basically the same location, the same era, the same people. But one story I read said that they were basically rummaging in the refrigerator, and these are the items that they found to make something with. And I thought, I don't know about that. That's a highly unusual group of ingredients to just turn up in a refrigerator. So I don't know. We'll see about that. Here's the story that I have. This came from Saveur magazine, and it's talking to actually Sirio Macchioni, one of the owners, it says co-owner of Le Cirque restaurant in New York City. Now remember, Mr. Macchioni is Italian and he's owning a French restaurant. This is what he says about this recipe. I believe it started in 1975 when I visited Prince Edward Island with a number of colleagues, including Craig Claiborne of the New York Times. To eat, we had only lobster and wild boar. After a week of this, everyone said, "Can we have some pasta?" I set out to make 2 dishes, one with vegetables and one Alfredo style, but in the end, I mixed it all together, vegetables with spaghetti and cream. After Claiborne wrote about it in the Times, everybody started coming to Le Cirque and asking for spaghetti a la Primavera. But my French chef said, "You want to do spaghetti? I don't want spaghetti in my kitchen." I didn't want a crisis, so I decided to prepare it in the dining room on a cart tableside. It looked nice and it tasted nice. We've never put it on the menu, but people still ask for it. And this is his own words from Saveur magazine. So this was the recipe that was with the interview. This is pretty much what I have seen for the original recipe, except for, being as this was a more current magazine article, there's way less cream in it. So if you made spaghetti alla Primavera this way, it would be very good. It wouldn't be very heavy, and it would probably be very delicious and pretty true to the original. This is not the way I do it when I give you my recipe, but this is his recipe, so I wanted to give it in case anyone wanted to do it this way. Now, throughout this recipe, one of the things that made this recipe a rather labor-intensive thing to do was that most of the vegetables are blanched. So what they would do was, one at a time, they would take the vegetables, put them in a sieve, dip them into boiling water for 30 seconds, take them out and cool them in ice water. Take those out and put them on a towel and pat them dry. You would be doing this with 3 different vegetables. The original recipe added some other vegetables too. So we'll get to that at the end of all the things you can put in this. But here's the recipe that was with the interview. 6 tablespoons of olive oil, 3 cloves of garlic minced, 6 ounces of button mushrooms quartered, 1 cup of asparagus tips blanched, 1 cup of small broccoli florets blanched, half cup of frozen peas blanched, 1 small zucchini quartered lengthwise, cut into 1-inch lengths and blanched, 1 pound of spaghetti cooked al dente, 1 cup of heavy cream, a half cup of grated Parmesan, 2 tablespoons unsalted butter, kosher salt and pepper, 1 cup of grape tomatoes halved, 2 tablespoons of thinly shredded basil leaves, and a half cup of lightly toasted pine nuts. So here is the method for this one, which is very similar to the way that I do it in mine. In the original recipe, they cook each thing, they saute it in a large skillet, and then they pour it out into a bowl and wipe the skillet out and then put the next thing in. So each thing you're sauteing in a skillet, then you dump it into a bowl, wipe the skillet out, and start over. Another labor-intensive step. So here is the new instructions with this recipe, which streamline it quite a bit. Heat 5 tablespoons of olive oil in a 12-inch skillet over medium heat. Add 2/3 of the garlic. Cook until golden, about 2 minutes. Add mushrooms, cook until golden, about 3 minutes. Add asparagus, broccoli, peas, and zucchini. Cook 3 minutes. Add pasta, cream, Parmesan, butter. Season with salt and pepper. Toss to combine and transfer to a plate. After he transfers that to a serving plate, bring the remaining oil, garlic, and tomatoes and basil to simmer over medium heat. Pour over the pasta and garnish with pine nuts. So the original recipe is basically the same as the recipe in this interview, but they used 3 cups of heavy cream. And then, like I said, the method was also long, and you had to wipe out the skillet after each sauté of a vegetable, and you finally culminate. The last thing you do is you make this very heavy sauce, and then you put the pasta into it, and then top it with the vegetables. That's a lot of heavy cream, and like I said, that doesn't belong in Alfredo anyway. Alfredo sauce is really just made with butter, grated Parmesan or Romano cheese, and pasta water and some garlic. I mean, there's not a lot to it. It's almost like basically the same thing as just making pasta with garlic and olive oil, except that you add the cheese to it and you melt the cheese in there, which is how you make Alfredo sauce. Alfredo doesn't use cream per se, although people make it that way. I think it's the American palate likes that really creaminess, you know? Traditional Alfredo just has the cheese and the pasta water making the creaminess and the olive oil and butter. You know, it's a combination of that. So the way I do pasta primavera is pretty much the same way as I do the shrimp and asparagus pasta in episode 133. So I'm going to give you my version, which is very similar to the version that was in the Sevier article, except for I leave out the heavy cream, and I also like to cook my vegetables, and then I turn them out of the pan into a bowl to keep warm. What I do is I usually use like a big bowl, like a glass bowl. I turn the vegetables into that, cover them, and then I take the pan and make the kind of like sauce that I'm going to put my pasta into. So this is like my pasta primavera juggling act, because I have 10 things going on all at the same time, and it all comes out okay. But this is a good dish. I didn't mention that primavera in Italian, it can mean springtime. It can mean very green. The idea there is that you're using fresh spring vegetables, because most of the vegetables that are in here are things that you can get now. For example, asparagus. Asparagus is ready in May. Peas are ready, some peas are ready in May. Zucchini is always the first squash that anybody has available at a farmer's market or anything. And mushrooms you can get all the time, of course. Broccoli. I've made this with canned mushrooms and frozen vegetables. I've made it with hardly any fresh things. And I've made it with all of the fresh things. So it's a very versatile recipe. You can use other vegetables that you like in it. A lot of times it has carrots in it. I remember getting it a lot, and it had carrots, broccoli, green beans, and peas in it. A lot of pasta dishes, Italian pasta dishes, have peas or green beans in them. I don't know why that is, but that is how it is. And I can remember my grandma making, this still makes me laugh, putting green beans in tomato sauce. Does not seem like a thing that anyone should ever do, but it is done. It's also done in some Syrian Lebanese cooking, Middle Eastern cooking. They make a dish that has green beans and a tomatoey sauce. So you will find those vegetables in there. So you can use different types and colors of peppers, like bell peppers or hot peppers even. You can use different types of squash, like summer squash. You can use the flat Italian beans. You can use different sorts of peas. You can use snap peas. You can use onions in it. So whatever. And this also is a dish that it makes a massive amount of food. Massive. So this is a great thing to make, say, on Sunday and then take it in your lunch, because believe me, it makes a lot. This is also a recipe where you can use different types of pasta. You can use spaghetti. You can use capellini or angel hair. I have had this with springs, which is one of my favorite pastas to use in this, because springs don't go with a lot of things, but they work great in this. This is also good for penne, either the mini or the regular size penne, or ziti. You can use a smaller ziti in it. So those things all work good with it. I wouldn't go outside of those unless you were doing shapes. Like you could do bow ties or wheels or whatever if you wanted to make it something that might be more fun for kids to eat or something. But this is a great recipe to use shaped pasta with. Capellini even. Capellini would work good in this. Here comes my recipe for pasta primavera alla Mary Mac. Okay, so you'll need olive oil, and you're going to need a lot through the recipe, so I am not saying how many tablespoons you need. You'll need 3 cloves of garlic minced, and you're going to be dividing those. You can also use the jarred minced garlic for this. A rounded up teaspoon of the jarred minced garlic is about a clove of garlic, but you know what the Italians say, put in as much as you want. 8 ounces of fresh mushrooms, sliced, and you can get those little white button mushrooms. 1 cup of asparagus, cleaned, remove the tough ends and cut it into like 1.5 inch long pieces. 1 cup of small broccoli florets. A 1/2 cup to a cup of frozen peas, depending upon how much you like. 1 small zucchini, sliced into 1/2 inch thick pieces. If it's big diameter, you might want to quarter those or halve those. 1 cup of grape tomatoes, halved. 1 cup of freshly torn spinach. Fresh basil or dried. If it's fresh, you want to take about, 8 to 10 leaves and tear those into small pieces. If it's dried, about a teaspoon of dried. 1 pound of spaghetti cooked. You can also use, like I said, angel hair, springs, different shapes, bow ties, penne, whatever. A 1/2 cup of finely grated, and this is fresh. Don't use jarred because it's not going to melt right. So a 1/2 cup of finely grated Romano cheese or Parmesan cheese. Either one works. 3 tablespoons of butter. And then you'll want kosher salt and fresh ground pepper to taste, and red pepper flakes if you like those. First, you want to prep all of your vegetables and put them in individual bowls because you're going to be adding these 1 or 2 at a time to your skillet. Have your pasta of choice ready, and then put a large pot of water on a burner that is set to medium heat to start heating that water up for your pasta cooking, so you can have that happening while you're preparing your vegetables. Okay, once you get all your vegetables prepped, and they're all in their little bowls and ready to go, make sure your Romano cheese is grated, and that's in a bowl. Have your butter ready to go. Make sure everything is ready. Mise en place. You want everything to be ready to go and in its place and ready to put in. Turn your pasta water on high and get your colander in the sink for draining the pasta. When the water starts to boil, add a teaspoon of salt and add the pasta and stir to prevent it from sticking. Cook that to the package instructions. If you're not a fan of al dente, then cook it like 2 minutes longer. If you're doing angel hair, you can actually do your vegetable part first and then get your angel hair ready because that cooks in 4 minutes. The other ones cook in like 11 minutes. Using a 12-inch skillet, put that on like medium heat, and then you're going to put 3 or 4 tablespoons of olive oil in to start. So you want to put the vegetables in order of how long they take to cook. Some things take a lot longer than others. So put about half of your minced garlic into the skillet, and then put in the asparagus and broccoli and start tossing them around in the oil and let those saute for about 3 minutes. Next, add your mushrooms and zucchini, all the while keeping an eye on your boiling spaghetti, and saute those for 3 minutes. And keep tossing things around a little bit. Next, you're going to add your peas and tomatoes because you want your tomatoes to cook enough that some of that juice comes out and adds into your flavor, And you want to cook and saute those for like 2 to 3 minutes and keep tossing them around to blend it in. Now you're going to top your spinach on there. And what you're going to do with your spinach is just sprinkle it over the top of the vegetables and then sprinkle your basil on with that. And just kind of turn it over so that it's blended in because you want it to be, I don't know, spinach has some kind of strange property where it likes to stick to itself. So when you put the spinach in, it all ends up in a clump. So just kind of turn it so that it's spread out in there and it begins to wilt. Toss those around. Once your spinach has wilted, you're going to turn the heat off and you're going to take those vegetables and remove them into a bowl to hold on to them. Put a cover over the top of those. Now back to the pasta for a second. You're going to take about a cup of pasta water out. I use a dipper and then I put it in a big glass measuring cup for the Alfredo sauce. So what you want to do is take a dipper like you use to serve soup or something and scoop some water out of there and put it into a glass measuring cup and set it aside. And then go ahead and drain your pasta. Now return your pasta to the pot and toss 1 tablespoon of butter in there and toss the pasta around. This will keep it from sticking together and it also just makes it taste good. Your vegetables are in your bowl waiting. Put that skillet back on a burner and set it on medium heat. Now you're going to add 1 or 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of butter, the rest of your garlic, and you're going to stir that until your butter melts and your garlic is just lightly sautéed. You don't want it to turn brown. You just want it to be lightly sautéed. Now add a 1/4 cup of the pasta water and stir that into your butter, garlic, olive oil mixture to heat it up. Once that gets heated up, add your cheese and you want to stir that around until it melts. And just keep stirring it until your cheese is melted and everything's pretty well blended. And then add your pasta and toss that to coat it. And it'll put like a nice light coating all over the whole pasta, okay? All over all of the pasta. Season that with salt and pepper just until it tastes how you like it to taste. So this is how I serve it. I pour the pasta into a large, flat pasta dish that I have, which is a fantastic thing. If you don't have one of those, you can use a big serving platter or a big bowl, and then top it with your cooked vegetables. You can also top those cooked vegetables with even more grated cheese if you really like cheese. And you can also do this. You can take the vegetables and the pasta and toss them together, but only do that if you're using penne or springs or some kind of a shape. Because if you try to do this with spaghetti or angel hair, it's a disaster, believe me. It's so much easier if you just put it on top and you kind of, when you scoop it out, grab some pasta and grab some vegetables, and you can pick out the things you want kind of and put it on there. Here's another thing you can do too. You can put the pasta in bowls and then say you're having like 6 people. And I mean, this is a lot of pasta, but you can divide your pasta into 6 portions in bowls and then put the vegetables on top of each bowl, which is a nice presentation. That's one of the serving suggestions actually for pasta primavera. You'll notice that I did not use the pine nuts. I did not do the slightly... I'll tell you why I didn't use pine nuts, because pine nuts cost a small fortune, okay? So even though they're a delightful addition to anything, I think at this point we can just leave them off. If they come down in price someday, I mean, nobody wants to put $12 worth of pine nuts on top of some spaghetti. That is pasta primavera. It's a wonderful, wonderful summer dish. I mean, you can add chicken or shrimp to this or something like that, but I encourage you to do it just like this, to make it this way. You can, if you're a person who likes more cheese or a saucier sauce, you can always adjust your pasta water amounts and your cheese amounts, whatever.
And hey, if you come into a whole bunch of money, throw some pine nuts on
Yeah.
there. You won the lottery, get some pine nuts to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, this is really good. It's a good summer dish. This is the time, if you ever said, wow, I'd really like to make something with whatever shaped pasta. Oh, this is a good one for that. I hope you try this, and I hope you like it. I love it, and we are going to be having leftovers of this for supper tonight because I made an enormous batch of it the other day. So we really enjoy it. I hope you do too.
And make sure to check us out online on Facebook and Threads at Mary Mac Bakehouse, on Instagram at Mary Mac Bakehouse and Mary Mac Podcast, and on our website, marymacpodcast.com.
Thanks a lot for listening if you did, and if you didn't, too bad for you.